Good news, nerds and nerdettes. Finally, Nvidia is launching native GeForce support for Linux operating systems. And we're going to start here with this article that was written today, in fact, talking about Nvidia launching the native GeForce support, now out for Linux. In a slowly growing show of support for the operating system, Nvidia has launched a beta version of GeForce now for Linux users. The app, which is available for users on Ubuntu 24.04 and likely many other distributions of Linux such as Bazzite and Nobara, allows you to stream compatible games that you own on various storefronts such as Steam. These games are rendered on Nvidia's servers, giving you access to better performance than you might have at home without minimal latency, with a monthly fee determining what hardware you have access to and for how long. Now, I'm just reading this for the first time myself, actually. I thought this was like a Nvidia GeForce app. So like if you had something like Wine installed on your computer, you could play, your native Windows games through Steam, and that way the Nvidia app would keep your graphics cards updated. And I'm sure that's built into this as well, but they're starting off with the whole paying a monthly fee and having your graphics card render your games for you. But there's already applications out that kind of do that same thing for you as well. Things like Wine that you can get through something like Pop! OS, which is what I use on my other computer. Personally, is Pop! OS. The app is another indication that Nvidia is taking note of the growing gaming community on Linux, having launched a similar app for Valve Steam OS and the Steam Deck. Specifically in May 2025, Nvidia support on Linux is still some way behind AMD. Although progress has been made in the past few months to bring functionality parity between it and Windows, there's still a lot of work to do. But it's more viable than ever to game exclusively on Linux with an Nvidia GPU with more support hopefully on the horizon. See, that's what I was hoping for. I was hoping for more like driver-related support for your graphics cards built in, for your computer. I was not expecting this whole render through your GPU thing. I think this, while it's a step forward, I don't know that it's the right step forward. Personally, I would rather just have the GeForce updates and let me use something, like I said earlier, something like Wine to play my games through, which allows me, to play the Windows games on a Linux machine without having to worry about whether or not your games are compatible with your operating system. The move towards Linux has been steadily growing as Microsoft continues to anger Windows users with the injection of AI features into many of its apps, its instability issues with recent Windows updates, and more issues that have affected gaming performance in a number of ways. Microsoft has acknowledged users opting for Linux recently and has vowed to improve Windows stability in response. So I work in IT in a fairly major company, and just in January alone, they issued 3 major Windows updates for the Windows 11 operating system. The first one specifically was the worst. Like, it actually caused issues with the operating system itself. The second one fixed those issues, but it left a bunch of holes open with the operating system as well. And so the third one, which came out fairly recently, supposedly patched all of fixed the remaining issues. So the first one, it had issues that actually broke portions of the operating system. The second one fixed those holes but left security gaps, and then the third one finally fixed everything, in theory. So I don't personally hold much hope for Windows for much longer, especially with all of they're trying to make Windows 11 like this AI kind of operating system, which I don't care for. I personally have disabled all of the AI Windows features on my computer. And if you've been patiently waiting, and here's this other article here, it says, if you've been patiently waiting for Nvidia to release a native Linux app for its GeForce Now cloud gaming service, your wait is over. After announcing it earlier this month at CES, Nvidia today unlocked the native app available in beta form. The caveat being that GeForce Now's journey into Linux territory starts with Ubuntu 24.04 or later. The new app delivers a seamless native experience that fits right into Linux desktop workflows, and it transforms compatible Linux systems into high-performance GeForce RTX-powered rigs, streaming support PC titles directly from the cloud at up to 5K resolution and 120 frames per second, or 1080p at 360 frames per second, Nvidia says. Nvidia still hasn't mentioned if it plans to broaden support to include other Linux distros. However, Ubuntu is generally recognized as the most popular Linux distribution. The exact market share varies by source and whether you're looking at Linux landscape as a whole or just certain segments, such as the enterprise. But according to SQ Magazine, Ubuntu is the top Linux distro with a 33.9% share of the Linux market. It is, to my understanding as well, that Ubuntu is the more popular of the distros for Linux in general. There are a few computers that we use at my work that are Ubuntu. The other one being Red Hat, but Ubuntu by and large seems to be the most user-friendly, especially for people that do not use Linux on a regular basis. That makes sense that that's likely where they would start with their beta testing and everything. That said, the breakdown could be different among gamers. Looking at Steam's latest survey results, for example, Arch Linux and Linux Mint are both more widely represented than Ubuntu. Linux Mint is actually based on Ubuntu, though, whereas Arch Linux is based on Debian. So Debian is the other main kernel for Linux, but by and large, a lot of the Linux distros, they do a lot of similar things. There are some that are more targeted and more specific based on what you're wanting the computer to do. Linux Mint is also a user-friendly version. Like I mentioned before, Pop! OS is the one that I use because it seems to be the one that's more game-focused. And it also, as well, is very, very easy to use. And it has Wine pre-installed, which is an application that allows you to play Windows games on Linux platforms without having to worry about compatibility issues. Still, Ubuntu is a relatively polished and user-friendly Linux OS, and it's a good starting place for Nvidia to focus its initial efforts. By adding Ubuntu to the mix, GeForce Now's tentacles now stretch into a whole bunch of different directions, including Windows on ARM beta, Mac OS, Chromebook, mobile devices, and smart TVs, and other devices, and it does actually sound like Nvidia will add more Linux distros at some point, as it specifically uses the phrase starting with support for Ubuntu 24.04 and later, when describing GeForce Now's foray into native Linux territory. So Windows on ARM. So the ARM version of Windows is basically the Windows version of their operating system that operates on the microcomputers such as Raspberry Pis. And so that's where they're looking for that kind of support as well on those. The thing with those is you can't install a secondary graphics card on those computers. The whole thing is on one board. It's one piece. And the other thing, when you have something on Linux, specifically matching up to one of the two main kernels for Linux distributions, like Ubuntu and Debian, once you have those, you can basically do any version of Linux because they all use the same kernel. Now, there are certain nuances that are different between the different distributions, but the changes are minor. And so once you have something that's ready for one version of Linux, you can pretty much just set it to operate on almost any version of Linux at that point. The hardest part is getting it onto that first distribution. Previously, workarounds were the only way to run GeForce Now on Linux, including GeForce Infinity going through Wine. And see, that's what I was talking about, the Wine, because it operates Windows applications on a Linux operating system. And it's not really so much as a workaround because it works for games or via a web browser. There is also a Linux experience specific to Valve's Steam Deck, though it only targets handheld-friendly resolutions up to 1200p at 90 frames per second. And we'll watch this video here in a second. The beta Linux app is built for PCs and notebooks, offering an experience similar to the existing GeForce Now app on Windows and Mac OS, Nvidia says. As with other versions of GeForce Now app, users on Ubuntu have access to goodies such as DLSS4 upscaling, ray tracing support, and pods powered by up to GeForce RTX 5080 GPUs. Now let's take a look at this promo video that they posted. So it looks like this GeForce Now is a lot like the cloud thing that Amazon tried to pull off and failed horribly at not too long ago. I don't even remember the name of it. This is the whole side of it where Nvidia GeForce is coming to Amazon Fire Sticks and Linux PCs. So like they said in the previous article, Nvidia is looking to branch out into the TVs and other things that run on Linux as well. So this falls right in kind of line with that. Nvidia GeForce Now's cloud gaming service is introducing Linux support for desktop computers and a native app for Amazon Fire TV sticks to bring the service into more living rooms. The brand announced a new native app at CES 2026, where it said they'll be launching early this year. And we know that it's going to be an Ubuntu first, and then branching out into the smart TVs and the Fire Sticks and things like that. I wonder how the compatibility is going to work with things like smart TVs and Bluetooth game controllers, whether that's, because there's all kinds of various companies that make controllers. I wonder what the support for those controllers are going to be, between the TVs and the controllers and to the Nvidia Now app. I think this is an interesting way to go about doing games, putting everything on a Fire Stick and allowing you cloud access to essentially your library of games. Now my question is, are you going to be able to access your Steam library through this, or can you only access games that you buy through Nvidia? That'll be another question I have for them as far as games and stuff like that. And I saw a snippet that said they were going to limit the amount of time, but I'll see if I can find that again. Let's see. We'll launch on Linux in beta first. Unclear if it'll be open release and anyone can access it. Select Fire Sticks will also soon get a native GeForce Now app. So you don't even have to do anything. It'll just, when you buy your Fire Stick TV, it'll come on it. Or they'll push it out via an update, it sounds like. And it's interesting that it's coming to the Fire Sticks because Amazon tried something similar to this, like I said earlier. I believe that was the Amazon Luna thing. I wonder why they didn't try to put that on their Fire Sticks and instead went with Nvidia's version of the same thing. Nvidia also confirmed GeForce Now will soon bring support for flight control systems to its platform. Oh, that'll be cool. So those of you guys that play flight simulators will actually be able to play those on this. And finally, Nvidia is introducing a new platform integrations to make automatic sign-in easier on other services. Battle.net is up first with the feature rolling out right now, while it will also come to Gaijin.net at a later date. I've never heard of Gaijin.net. I'll have to look into that. If you subscribe to Nvidia GeForce Now, the brand recently changed its monthly limits, bringing in a 100-hour timer for almost all users. You have to pay extra to play over 100 hours a month unless you're on the brand's founder members scheme. Now, I don't know if 100 hours for y'all is a lot or not. It can be for some people, especially those of you that, where your main hobby is gaming. 100 hours of playtime might not be enough, especially if you look at sometimes I play 5-10 hours a day on days where I don't have anything to do and I'm not doing anything, usually on the weekends. So I can see how that time can add up quickly. Thanks for watching. Drop a like and subscribe, and I'll catch you all in the next video.